Hey everybody. I hope you're having a really good morning, and I hope you're ready just to dive right on in. No long intro. Let's go. I'm going to first start out with blueletterbible.org. It is where I like to go when I do my Bible episodes to get scriptures. And we're going to read, it's not a scripture of the day, it's called Daily Promises. Kind of the same concept. Today's scripture is Psalms chapter 6 verse 9. The Lord hath heard my supplication, the Lord will receive my prayer. Reflection. Ever are the Lord's ears aroused to hear the pleas of his people. He is faithful to hear your cry and to answer your prayer. Take joy in the loving kindness of the Lord and give glory to his mighty name, even as he answers your pleas with peace and comfort. So, on Monday, I said we were going to start doing like a scripture of the day or Bible verse of the day. This is what I'm going to start doing at the beginning of every episode is go to blueletterbible.org and do a daily promises. Excuse me. I feel like that could be really good and it can just kind of start us off on the right track. So, what I have for us first is Matt Walsh from the Daily Wire. It's an opinion piece, and it's called We Have Cameras to Monitor Police Officers. Now we need cameras to monitor teachers. I agree. So, if you want to take a trip and cannot bring your precious poodle along for the journey, you can always hand him over to your local dog boarding facility. And when you do, you likely find that they offer what has become nearly ubiquitous at these sorts of places, a live webcam. Through this function, a customer is able to tune in anytime and see how their pooch is being treated and cared for by the staff. Or they just might be curious to know what little Fido is up to and how he's getting along with all the other slobbering, mangy beasts. There are many potential reasons why a dog owner might want to have this kind of access, and it is hard to imagine any real downside to granting it. Everyone agrees that there is probably too much surveillance going on in our society today. But most of the bad sort of surveillance is the kind where we are being watched, often without our knowledge, by people who have no right or reason to be watching us. On the other hand, most of us agree that surveillance can be good and has a place when it enables us to see what is happening with and to something we care about, like our dogs. Or our money, which is why nobody complains about bank tellers being closely monitored. Daycares, human daycares I mean, have cameras for the same reason. It is not that we actively distrust the staff at the dog boarding place or the bank or the daycare. It is just that these people are handling very precious cargo, and transparency and accountability are therefore urgently important. You would certainly be quite suspicious of a dog boarder who steadfastly refused to put up cameras, or a daycare facility that wanted to grant its staff more privacy in their interactions with your toddler. You don't need to see what's happening here. You can trust us. Nothing would make you distrust them more than hearing that. This is to say nothing of body cameras on police officers. The protection in this case works both ways. They create greater accountability for police officers while also potentially protecting cops from many false claims made against them. Just think about where the cop in the Micaiah Bryant shooting would be today if he hadn't been wearing his body camera. Witnesses and media reports claimed that a racist cop had randomly murdered a helpless, unarmed child. It was only because of his camera that we quickly discovered the truth. The unarmed child was a teenager armed with a knife and was in the process of trying to stab another teenager to death when the officer fired, saving the victim's life. This is why, though police shootings themselves are often controversial, the body cameras allowing us to see these incidents generally aren't. In the aftermath of any shooting caught on camera, you rarely hear anyone, cop or citizen, say that they wish we were not able to see it. This all raises a question. If almost everyone agrees that we should have cameras to see what dog boarders, bank tellers, cops, and daycare workers are doing, why don't we have cameras to see what public school teachers are doing? If you wouldn't send your dog away for a few hours without the ability to check in and see for yourself what is happening with him, why shouldn't you have the same sort of access to your child? If we want this level of accountability and transparency for people who watch our pets and handle our money and care for our toddlers and enforce our laws, why shouldn't we want it? Why don't we want it for the people teaching our kids? The current and well warranted backlash against critical race theory in schools represents something of an awakening for many parents. They finally seem to realize that the school system cannot be implicitly and absolutely trusted to teach children whatever it sees fit to teach them. Parents have a right to know what is being taught and to have a say in it. Despite the ridiculous arguments put forth by many on the left, and some especially feeble and useless members of the right, teachers do not have a free speech right to say whatever they want to the children in their classrooms. Public school teachers are government employees entrusted to perform a particular task. They should not have the liberty to deviate from that task whenever they like. They should not have the freedom to stand on their perch as teachers and assume the additional roles of counselor, psychiatrist, parent, and spiritual guru. The job is important but limited, and parents ought to know whether and how it is being performed. Cameras are not the only way to accomplish this task, but they are an important tool. When I took to Twitter to advocate for cameras in the classroom, I was met with intense pushback from many people, including many parents, who apparently don't want to know exactly what government employees are saying to their kids. One common refrain was that cameras would infringe on privacy and freedom in the classroom. I understand the privacy objection as it pertains to the kids. As a parent, I certainly wouldn't want a live classroom webcam that any person could use to monitor my children. But there are easy and obvious ways around this problem. The cameras could be password protected, and only parents with custody of their children are given the code to access. Also, the cameras could focus on the front of the room, capturing just the teacher. Perhaps only the audio would be accessible to parents under normal circumstances, with the video being released whenever there is an incident or controversy, like we do with police body cameras. There's also face blurring technology that could be utilized to protect the privacy of children. Dozens of workarounds immediately present themselves if the concern is over the privacy of the students in the class. But for many critics of the camera in the classroom idea, the concern seems to be equally, if not primarily, the privacy and freedom of the teachers. I have no workarounds for that because public school teachers, in their capacity as public school teachers, should have only as much privacy as we grant bank tellers. We won't follow them into bathrooms and break rooms with cameras, but when they're on the clock, performing the tasks for which they are paid, they should be monitored. If our money is too important to simply trust that the nice lady at PNC will be honest in her handling of it, then how much more important are our children? The main thing we are looking to guard against is the psychological abuse of students through ideological and political indoctrination, but that is not the only thing. Keep in mind that, according to the Department of Education's own study in 2004, nearly 10% of students are victims of sexual misconduct by educators. That amounts to 3 or 4 million victims at any given time. All the more reason for greater surveillance. Like police body cams, the protection also runs both ways. Teachers who are falsely accused of inappropriate actions can simply point to the tape. Teachers stuck in parent-teacher conferences trying to convince oblivious parents that their little angel is actually a demon-possessed terrorist in the classroom will now have video evidence to prove it. The advantages to cameras in the classroom can be enjoyed by all honest parties. In the end, then, it boils down to this question. Is there anything that could happen in the classroom that you absolutely would not want documented on film? Whatever that thing is, it should not be happening in the classroom. There you go. That's a good one. I agree. We should be monitoring what teachers are teaching in the classroom. We as parents and taxpayers have a right to know what they're doing and what they're teaching our children. And we have a right to know if they are deviating from the approved plans that are given through what's voted on the Board of Education. They can only teach what they're allowed to teach, and they can't deviate from that plan. And we should know if they are. That's all I'm saying. I have no problem with this. And it's some of his ideas about maintaining privacy for the children are really good ideas. And The only reason you wouldn't want any of this happening in the classroom is because you're doing something that you know that parents would not approve of, and they would put a stop to it, and you don't want them to. Next story. I'm going to run through these really quickly for today. This is an opinion piece from Ben Shapiro. Stop surrendering education to the radical left. If you can see, we're talking about education today. This Independence Day, a poll from Issues and Insights revealed that only 36% of adults aged 18 to 24 said they were proud to be American, compared with 86% of those over the age of 65. This shouldn't be surprising. America's children have been raised in a system dedicated to the proposition that America itself is evil, a repository of discrimination and bigotry, a country founded in sin and steeped in cruelty. This week, for example, the National Education Association, the single largest teachers union in the country, passed a resolution pledging to, quote, share and publicize information already available on critical race theory, end quote, provide an already created in-depth study that critiques empire, white supremacy, anti-blackness, anti-indigeneity, racism, patriarchy, cis heteropatriarchy, capitalism, ableism, anthropocentrism, and other forms of power and oppression at the intersections of our society, end quote. And, quote, join with Black Lives Matter at school and the Zen Education Project to call for a rally this year on October 14th, George Floyd's birthday, as a national day of action to teach lessons about structural racism and oppression, end quote. Good Lord. Meanwhile, the American Federation of Teachers is hosting radical grifter Ibram X. Kendi, who preaches on behalf of overt racial discrimination. Now Americans are banding together to fight back against the indoctrination of its children. States have begun to ban the indoctrination of CRT in schools, for example, but some thinkers are fighting back, suggesting that such content standards undermine the notion of a liberal education. In the pages of the New York Times, for example, a bipartisan group of thinkers excoriate such legislation as un-American. They argue essentially that the educational mission of, quote, helping turn students into well-informed and discerning citizens, end quote, is undermined by such restrictions. But this completely misreads both the purpose of American education and the state of American education. First, the purpose of public education is to create, quote, well-informed and discerning citizens, end quote. But citizens is a specific word with a specific definition. According to Aristotle, a good citizen is a person who upholds the constitution of his particular polis. If we teach our students to be bad citizens in the Aristotelian sense, citizens who disparage the polis with lies, who engage in tribal politicking rather than civic friendship, who insist that truth be subsumed in favor of intersectional sensitivities, we will wind up as a country with no future. Second, American public education has all too often become a tool of those who wish to produce anti-citizens, those who wish to tear down the systems in the name of some higher or lower purpose. No society can survive this in the long term. K-12 public education was not designed to be a free-for-all. Standards and practices must be established. The only question is whose standards and whose practices. For the past several decades, the answer seems to be the radical left standards, undermining key American principles like individual rights and equality before the law in favor of utopian redistribution of outcome based on group identity. It is one thing to discuss the ideological perversion of CRT in order to combat it. It is another thing to indoctrinate in its central tenets. Our education system is currently far more likely to do the latter than the former. That must stop. Good citizens have an obligation to stop it, whether that happens through the mechanisms of civil rights lawsuits, or through the mechanisms of local school board elections, or through the mechanism of state legislation. All appropriate tools when it comes to defining how our children ought to be educated at public expense. Radical indoctrination of our children must stop. To do anything less would be un-American. I wholeheartedly agree with that one too. It is, of my opinion, myself, that what they are starting to teach our children in a lot of the mostly Democrat run states and cities and school systems is bad. It's bad for our children. We should not be teaching them to hate the country that they were born in, that God graced them the privilege to be born as an American. And the fact that there's not very many people that are proud to be Americans anymore is because they don't really know America. They've been lied to their whole lives. The age group ages 18 to 24. These people just recently came out of school. So they have been being lied to for the last 18 to 20 years of their lives. And it's crazy to think that. But that's what the education system has been doing. That's why it makes sense for Matt Walsh's idea to put cameras in the classroom so this can't happen anymore. Parents don't want their kids learning this stuff, and more parents are speaking out against it. And the left, I think, has gone too far pushing this into our children and trying to indoctrinate them. The left took one step over the line too far, and parents are starting to wake up. And I hope that more and more people start speaking out about what the radical left is doing and start fighting back. Because it's not going to be enough for just the few of us that are doing it. We all have to start doing it, no matter the consequences of doing it. Okay, so the last thing I want to do today, because this is going to be probably one of the shortest episodes that I've ever done, is the Education Insanity, the Top 10 Stories of the Week, Volume 23 by Chrissy Clark. I don't do these all the time, but I might start doing these every week because she does one every week. So, welcome back to Education Insanity, a weekly column updating you on the most insane events taking place in our nation's schools. Here, we'll delve into the growing presence of critical race theory, the ideology that claims that America is irredeemably rooted in racism, and woke culture. Let's get started. Number 10. Duke professor under fire for paper that encouraged support for cleaner energy in Africa, the college fix. A professor at Duke University is being scrutinized for publishing a paper that encouraged African nations to transition away from wood burning stoves to clean, inexpensive energy options that could offset carbon emissions. The Duke alumni Twitter account also fell under fire for promoting the paper. I don't know why that would take such backlash. Maybe because it's an African country and they're going to say because it's racist. Probably. Number 9, Biden admin expands tuition breaks for future teachers, removes GPA requirements to provide access to students of color. The Daily Wire. The Biden administration announced plans to expand tuition breaks for future teachers via the Teacher Education Assistance for College and Higher Education grant program run by the Department of Education. The plan will also remove the GPA requirement for grant recipients to allegedly provide more access to students of color. So great. You're going to have people with low GPA scores and low IQs going into the school system to teach your children. Wonderful. That sounds like a great idea. Number 8. Parents at exclusive Manhattan school reject apology from principal over woke video, the New York Post. Parents at the Spence School, an elite $57,000 per year all-girls private school in Manhattan, opted to reject an apology issued from the school's principal over a video shown to students disparaging white women. Parents claim that Principal Bodie Brizendine is not doing enough to curb the school's woke agenda. Wow, that's crazy. I wonder what that video's like. Maybe we'll check it out. Number 7. UC San Diego requires new assistant chemistry professors to complete research that advances anti-racism, anti-oppression. The Daily Wire. The University of California, San Diego is requiring new assistant professors in the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields, or STEM fields, to address issues of race and racism. Assistant professors in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry are required to design and teach undergraduate courses that align with the African American Studies minor, AASM, and the Black Diaspora and African American Studies major. That's all foreign to me. I don't know what any of that means. So, if you understood that, If you're watching on YouTube, please comment below and kind of explain what those are to me. Number 6, nation's largest teachers union moves forward with resolution that dubs Israel occupied Palestinian territory. The Daily Wire. Representatives for the nation's largest teachers union passed a resolution aimed at recognizing Palestine as a state. The resolution passed during the National Education Association's annual representative meeting and was referred to the appropriate committee and insists the union must recognize the existence and sovereignty of Palestine and Palestinian children and families and our human right to access a quality education and live freely. Well, no, that's Israeli territory, technically. Palestine is occupying Israeli territory. I'm not going to get into the Israeli Palestinian conflict. I've done a podcast on it. You can go back and find it and listen to it if you want. Or, better yet, let Ben Shapiro explain it to you. Go to his page on YouTube. You'll have to scroll down quite a bit, but there's like an over 30-minute, maybe 40-minute episode that he does explaining the entire conflict between Israel and Palestine, and it's kind of like a whole history of it. Very in depth, and it's very good. It's a little bit out of my realm. I don't want to talk too much on things I don't know. Number 5, Nicole Hannah Jones rejects UNC tenure offer for position at Howard University, The Hill. New York Times journalist Nicole Hannah Jones announced that she rejected a tenured position at the University of North Carolina and will take a similar position at Howard University, a historically black college. Hannah Jones's announcement came after UNC initially denied Hannah Jones tenure. I will tell you one thing about Howard University. They do indoctrinate their students. They do a lot of teaching of what Louis Farrakhan teaches. It's a crazy freaking story. Just go look up the history of people that Louis Farrakhan teaches on YouTube. You can find it. Just kind of type in some words. You'll find it and come across it. Um, that whole podcast that went viral when Nick Cannon was being super racist and saying that white people are animals and they're soulless because we have no melanin in our skin. Um, he learned that through Howard University because of Louis Farrakhan. Number 4, Ohio private school students denied re-enrollment after mom's inflammatory campaign against indoctrination. Fox News. The children of 2 outspoken Ohio mothers were denied re-enrollment at a prestigious private school after the duo demanded transparency in their children's alleged race-based curriculum. The mothers were notified on June 11th that they had breached the school's parent-school contract by creating a coalition that pushed back on what they call the school's intimidation and bullying campaign against students and parents with non-progressive views. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on in our education system right now. Your best bet is, if you can, homeschool your kids. Get them out of a public school or find a really good Christian school to put them in. I promise you, it'll do wonders for your children. I understand that not all parents can do that. Not all parents have the time to homeschool, and not all parents can afford to put their kids into a private school. But if you can, that's what you should do. Number 3, Teachers Union president falsely claims CRT critics want to ban schools from teaching history, discussing racism. The Daily Wire. Randy Weingarten, the president of the American Federation of Teachers, shared an article from the Washington Post falsely claiming that critical race theory opponents don't want children to be taught history or have discussions about racism. Weingarten captioned the article, "Incredibly important piece from Kimberly Crenshaw about why these bans on teaching history and discussing racism in the classroom are so dangerous. Our students deserve to have the freedom to learn and discuss this in school." Right. Students have a right to learn history, but they have a right to learn the full and true history, the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's how it works. You teach them everything about history. Everything America that did that was wonderful. Everything America did that was bad. The ugly truths of America's history. Every nation has an ugly truth about it. Maybe even more than one ugly truth. That's just how it works, because people is human nature. We're sinful, we're wicked, we're corrupt, we're selfish. That's how people are. So, of course, there are going to be nations that have sinful pasts. But that doesn't mean that they didn't learn and grow from that and develop into something much better. And America has done that. And now we're devolving back into the wickedness and the selfishness of human nature. And we're taking our country down and our children down with us. That's what we're doing. And it's really sad. Number two, Chicago public schools putting free condoms in nearly every school, including elementary. Chicago Sun-Times. Nearly every Chicago public school will provide students as young as fifth graders with menstruation products and condoms. The CPS Board of Education passed an action item that requires all schools in Illinois to provide menstruation products and requires schools that teach fifth grade and up to maintain a condom availability program. That is a load of crap. They are pushing sex on children at younger and younger and younger ages. I keep referencing a lot of things that you can go watch to learn more about things that I don't want to speak on because I don't know enough about it to do so. Go to John Doyle's YouTube channel. I even shared it on my Facebook. It's a pretty long video. You might want to watch it in chunks. I watched the whole thing at one time. But it's about pornography and how it's destroying men and young men especially. Very good story, episode, documentary about it. I don't know what you want to call it. Very informative, very educational. He's very smart. He knows a lot, and I promise you, you'll learn something from it. And it'd probably be good for you to learn. And then share the video. Number one, nation's largest teachers union says it will teach critical race theory in all 50 states, 14,000 school districts. The Daily Wire. The nation's largest teacher union pledged to teach critical race theory, the ideology that claims America is irredeemably rooted in racism, in all 50 states and across the more than 14,000 school districts the union works with. Following negative press coverage of the resolution from primarily right-of-center news outlets, the NEA removed the agenda item from its website. All right, well, that's your 10 education insanity stories of the week, volume number 23. And that is today's episode. I want to thank everybody for joining me. I appreciate it. All the support. It means so much to me. I really, really appreciate it. Please join me on my Facebook, Lauren Collins. I just gotta say something. You can email me, gotta say something 21 at gmail.com. Join my subreddit community, r/just gotta say something. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe to my channel. Comment on the video if you would like to, and share the video. It means a lot to me. I'm really trying to get this growing, get this out there. It means so much. Also, if you're on audio only, you can go and subscribe to it. And also, you can leave me a review. I think on Spotify you can do that, and Pandora. And Google Podcasts as well. And I'm also on Stitcher and Anchor. If you want to look there, you can favorite the podcast if you have the Anchor app. Anyway, thanks again so much for being with me today. I really appreciate it. I hope I'll see you tomorrow. Have a wonderful rest of your day. God bless.